Good morning. My name is Regina Hopkins, and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast today on Safe Spaces, a podcast about maintaining a safe and open work environment. This podcast is being sponsored by the DC Bar Pro Bono Center and the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. The Pro Bono Center provides technical support and legal assistance to nonprofits in the DC area, and the Center for Nonprofit Advancement also assists nonprofits with technical advice and support. We are privileged today to have Cynthia Boyle, who is the General Counsel for Employment at Willis Towers Watson, a large consulting firm that operates in the DC area. And Cindy leads the company's global employment team. She focuses on providing counsel to the company on a wide variety of issues related to employment and human resources, including litigation, non-competition, restrictive covenants, employee relations, discrimination, and compliance, as well as compensation and benefits. She has spent her career at Willis Towers Watson, and first joining the firm in 1991. And then before going to law school, she was a writer, a journalist in the aviation field. Cindy is a graduate of Washington College of Law at American University, and she has also received an MA from the American University in Journalism and Public Affairs, and an undergraduate degree in English Writing and Economics at St. Mary's College, Notre Dame, Indiana. And with that, I say welcome, Cindy, and thank you for taking time to talk to us about this topic, which is, as we know, very timely these days in terms of sexual harassment in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Regina. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, it certainly is a timely topic.
Yeah. So as I said, it is a timely topic. There's been starting really Harvey Weinstein scandal sort of kicking it off, but also, as we've gone through subsequent people, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly at Fox News. We've also had, people like Kevin Spacey, and as we speak, Al Franken has just got caught up with it, Roy Moore, and even the President of the United States. So, and several media companies, including NPR and the New Republic and the like. So the thing, I just wanted to take some time today to talk about how, as an employer, you can create a space where employees feel comfortable coming forward with issues that they may have. One of the things that has struck me as I've listened to these stories is how long women have kept them inside themselves, and let them tear themselves up about it because they didn't feel that there was any place where they could go to talk about it. And in particular, NPR, I was touched by some of the women at NPR who said that they just felt that because everybody knew it was going on and no one did anything, that meant that there was no point in going to HR. So I'd like to sort of start with, just that sort of basic overview.
Yeah, sure. And I do think it's a really good time for organizations to look at their policies and practices, because I think we can all expect that there might be an uptick, in complaints and reports. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of background and overview maybe on employers' obligations. So an employer's obligations relating to sexual harassment, or really any kind of harassment, arise before any act of harassment occurs. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, has issued guidance in the past that indicates that employers should or really must take reasonable steps to prevent harassment before it happens. And as you said, I think the most effective way to prevent and manage sexual harassment is obviously to create a positive work environment, one that fosters open communication and respect at all levels of the organization. So the question is, how do you do that? I think there has to be a public commitment from senior leaders and supervisors to create an environment where employees feel safe to speak out and raise concerns. And, without getting too legalistic or talking too much about, policies and procedures, I think one way to convey that public commitment really is to adopt a respect at work policy. and then to communicate that policy to employees and take every opportunity you can to remind them of it on a regular basis. And just, real quickly, there are a few key components that, should be included in Respect at Work or anti-harassment policies to make them effective, and to send the message to employees, that the organization truly does, foster open communication and wants people to come forward. So in terms of what the policy should include, for example, it first should explain to employees what harassment is, provide a definition, and maybe even provide a couple of examples so that everyone is on the same page. They also can indicate or should indicate that harassment of any kind, whether based on gender, race, age, disability, or any other protected characteristic, won't be tolerated in the workplace by the employer. So, the organization should indicate that they have a zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. And I think a really critical aspect of the policy would be to provide employees multiple avenues to report concerns or raise issues, so that employees can very easily identify a resource whom they feel comfortable with if they do have something to raise. Among the avenues or resources that could be offered would be like a human resources representative, if you have a human resources department, line supervisors or managers, heads of departments, other senior leaders of the organization, or in the nonprofit, world, even an executive director. I think the real key is to provide several alternatives, whatever those might be for your, particular organization, just so that employees don't ever feel like they, have nowhere to go with their concerns. And of course, playing, I think, into the importance of creating a workplace environment where people feel comfortable raising issues is to clearly indicate in the policy and in any communications to employees and find every opportunity to tell them that there will be absolutely no retaliation for raising a concern. And then, of course, having a policy and all these ways to report claims won't be effective unless the organization takes the steps they need to take when they receive the complaint to deal with it promptly and, impartially. So when organizations adopt policies, they should consider the steps they'll take to investigate and address the issues once they receive the complaint or the report. And then finally, again, with trying not to get too legalistic, I also should mention that adopting a policy is also very important, because doing so can be critical to an employer's defense if in the unfortunate event that they're sued for harassment. And adopting a policy, is viewed as one of the reasonable steps to prevent harassment by the courts. So, I think those are some of the things employers can do to try to start to address these issues and try to, at least communicate to employees that they want to hear about, issues that are making them uncomfortable in the workplace.
One of the things that you mentioned was the supervisors and the role of supervisors. And
right.
Like I said, it was very sad to see the women at NPR talk about how a lot of supervisors knew what was going on, but no one did anything. So they imputed the whole organization's attitude towards those supervisors. And I think a supervisor, it's one thing, it's not just what I feel, but what if I, as a supervisor, know that something's going on or observe something, what is my responsibility as the supervisor to deal with this and to help contribute to this open and respectful work environment?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Supervisors have a really important role in setting the tone in an organization. And tone at the top is critical for many reasons, but certainly in this area, it's really critical. The supervisors are the people that organizations have to rely on to create, this positive work environment where we hope, there's respect and open communication. And they're really the ones responsible for creating the safe and respectful workplace. And therefore, they really have to be held accountable for reporting and responding to incidents or potential incidents of harassment. And I think organizations really need to communicate these responsibilities and expectations to supervisors clearly as soon as they become a supervisor or hired in as a supervisor, and frequently. Always take whatever opportunities you can to remind them of their obligation. And with respect to harassment issues specifically, I think supervisors need to be told in no uncertain terms that they have to take seriously and report, any report of potential harassment that they might receive or witness, no matter how offhand or informal it might seem. I would caution supervisors against, employees who might, come to them and say something along the lines of, I can take care of this situation myself, or I don't need you or anyone else to get involved in my behalf, or I'd rather just let the matter drop. If they're coming to them in the first place, there must be something that they're concerned about. So when that happens, the supervisor really has to take action. And depending on the way the organization deals with harassment complaints and investigations, that might mean the supervisor himself or herself investigating the complaint, or raising it with the appropriate peer or leader or HR or whoever is the right person to handle the matter. Obviously supervisors should just follow whatever procedures organizations have put in place relating to any reports or complaints. Last point is, if supervisors witness inappropriate conduct and do nothing to stop it, their failure to act doesn't only place the employer at legal risk, but it also, obviously, as you indicated in the NPR situation, it negatively impacts the potential for a positive work environment and the open communication that organizations should be trying to foster. If employees think that supervisors are turning a blind eye or just don't really care about appropriate conduct, they're definitely not going to feel comfortable about reporting their concerns. So, again, I think tone at the top is really important, and I think supervisors need to take their responsibilities in this area really seriously.
And even if it's not in their department, if
yes.
you're a supervisor for the whole entity, essentially.
Yes, if you're a supervisor for the whole entity, you have an obligation for the whole entity, so it doesn't have to just be in your department. So if you witness something in another department, or, in some cases someone may come to you because they're more comfortable coming to someone in a different department, yes, supervisors would definitely have to act in that case.
And one thing you mentioned is, and I've seen this when, in my legal career, I've had supervisors come to me and they said the employee wants to keep it confidential, or they don't want us to do anything, or something like that. And I think you mentioned, and someone else said this to me, if they didn't want you to do anything, they would have stayed in their office.
Right.
They wouldn't have come
exactly.
and talked to you. So the fact that they're taking the initiative to at least tell you about it means that they want something to happen. They may not want it to become a big deal, meaning they don't want everybody to sort of come down on them, but they at least want the offending behavior to stop. So,
right.
So when someone comes to you and says, well, they told me I should keep it confidential, what do you say to that supervisor?
Yeah, and this comes up a lot. So, first of all, if someone comes to you and says, again, I don't want you to do anything, not doing anything really isn't an option for supervisors, or really, for that matter, for anyone, who receives a report of harassment. People who aren't or employees who aren't supervisors might not have the same level of obligation, but again, to have this open communication in a workplace, I think that they, should raise the issue as well if they witness something or if someone raises a concern to them. And as I just mentioned, doing nothing or failing to act really places the employer at significant legal risk and definitely negatively impacts the environment. It's completely, I think, understandable that someone raising an issue would be, very concerned about it, how it might impact them. But a supervisor or whoever, they talk to about the complaint should assure them that, there will be no retaliation for raising a concern, and they should explain that, doing nothing will only make the situation worse or more untenable. And yeah, as you said, it's very, very common that an employee raising a complaint will ask for confidentiality. And, again, to me, it's perfectly understandable that an employee might ask for that because of the fear of retaliation. However, the supervisor or whoever is conducting the investigation really should never promise or guarantee confidentiality, because really the organization can't conduct an effective investigation if it promises or guarantees confidentiality, and I think they can explain that to the person who comes forward. At some point it will be necessary to reveal certain information to certain parties just to make sure that the investigation is being done in as thorough a way as possible. And sometimes what I tell people is it's okay to promise confidentiality, and these are kind of the buzzwords, to the extent possible under the circumstances. and to indicate that information will be shared on a need-to-know basis when investigating the complaint. But really, in terms of confidentiality, nothing beyond that should be promised or guaranteed.
Well, the other thing that sort of comes up or has come up in the past, there's that slogan, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Right.
But legally, no, it doesn't. So just because, and so could you talk about people who may be in a social setting outside, they're still a boss or a supervisor or a coworker, but now they're outside of their normal work environment.
Right. Yeah. Again, great.
What are the rules? Yeah. What are the rules there?
Okay. Great question. And maybe the rules aren't as black and white as we might like them to be. But I mean, I think the bottom line is that no matter where you are, harassment by your coworkers or supervisors does not have to be and should not be tolerated. And employers can and have been held liable for the discriminatory actions of its employees that have occurred outside the workplace if the harassing activity can be shown to be related to the employment relationship, even if it occurs outside the workplace in a social setting and outside normal work hours. It can be grounds, for a sexual harassment claim. A little more unclear if the activity unquestionably takes place outside the work environment. But, I mean, in those cases, an employer could be held liable if the consequences of whatever activity or action occurred come back, to the workplace and result in misconduct or retaliation or something like that. The obvious situations where harassment can occur and where certainly an organization can address it are, business travel and outside work-related events. What we're also seeing a lot now is this kind of inappropriate behavior occurring on social media or by text or email, even if the inappropriate communications occur outside normal work hours. I mean, with today's technology, I don't think there's any such thing as a normal work hours. Everyone seems to be tied to their devices 24/7. So I think any of those situations, the social media situations or the texting or the emailing would be covered under an organization's respect at work policies or the expectations that a company has for appropriate behavior, and they definitely should be addressed. There might be some technical legal analysis that would come into play, to determine whether someone has legal standing to bring a lawsuit against an employer for actions that might occur between colleagues outside of work and at a non-work event, for example. But I don't think that means an employee shouldn't raise the issue with their employer and that the employer can't address it to ensure that its workplace remains a safe environment. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it definitely, I think, could affect the workplace and the relationships in the workplace and the employment relationship. I think that you can probably find that nexus. So, and then, I would just say that, supervisors, again, I mean, they never stop being a supervisor, in my view, as an employment lawyer. So if they witness something outside the workplace at an event that they think would have a negative impact on the workplace, I think they should try to address it.
One of the things that I've seen, and in my limited role, and I'm sure you've seen a lot more, is sort of group activities. Where you get a group of people and someone says an off-color joke or they send a tacky tweet or something like that. And everybody laughs, and so everybody assumes, oh, everybody's fine with it, and not really realizing the role that peer pressure can play in some of those dynamics. I don't know if you can talk about, just because someone seems to be going along with it doesn't mean they like it. And I guess
no, it doesn't. And I think I would say that. I mean, if someone or everyone seems fine with an activity, but the activity clearly isn't appropriate. I think, again, if there's a supervisor there or, others who witness the activity and are pretending to go along with it but don't think it's appropriate, I mean, I think they still have an obligation to address it and to report it. It kind of goes back to our discussion about, the person who reports something but then says they don't want anything to be done about it. I think you have to help that person understand, that an activity they're fine with, even if someone says, oh, I was fine with that activity, it was no big deal. But an activity they're fine with might not be fine with someone else. and it's an employer's obligation to create, this comfortable and safe work environment for all of its employees. And then the other thing I probably should emphasize here is that it's really important, I think, to educate employees about what harassment or inappropriate behavior looks like. That's one reason for maybe including examples in a respect at work policy, just so that they understand what's acceptable and what isn't. In some cases, people might think a certain activity is fine or acceptable, when really it's not in the context of a workplace, and it could be offensive to others. So, and again, one final point maybe about, kind of people going along to get along and not wanting to raise a concern in this group activity setting. I think that mindset often can result from a fear of retaliation, and how colleagues, not only supervisors, but maybe peers and other colleagues will treat them if they report a situation. So again, I think it's really important for employers to find opportunities to emphasize that there will be no retaliation, for raising a concern. So, I think as often as you can let employees know that, it's really helpful to trying to create this open environment, open communication environment.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that some of the articles I've been reading in the news lately with some of the talking is that, the value of having diversity in leadership positions and how that makes people more comfortable addressing the problem. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have had similar experiences to that. The people, if you're a woman and you have a problem and everybody's a guy, it's not the same as having, as you talk, a woman to talk to, or someone who is more like you than
right. Yeah, I think and diversity creates all kinds of, there have been studies that it creates all kinds of benefits, and certainly in this area I think it does too. If there is diversity, I think it sends a message of inclusion to employees, and, that makes them feel like there's a level of understanding there, that, in turn hopefully facilitates collaboration and collegiality. I think employees are more likely to feel comfortable and happy in an environment where inclusivity or inclusion is a priority, and where they feel included. So if they see someone as a leader who kind of looks like them, that's very helpful. And I think it also sends a message that, all employees are valued, regardless of gender, age, race, sexual orientation, or whatever protected characteristic it is. And then, I just think, and I've just seen it in practice, and in an atmosphere like that, I think employees are motivated to treat each other with respect. And I think, that then starts to create the kind of work environment you want. And at the same time, an added benefit is I think it reduces the reports of inappropriate behavior.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Cindy, for talking with us. I don't know if there's any sort of final pointers. You talked about the need to train people and emphasize the culture. Is there any sort of final tips that you would provide people?
No, I think I would just again say, the tone from the top is key, that it's just very important to let people know that there will be no retaliation if they raise an issue. And, I just think employers are committed to doing, all the things we talked about, won't only reduce the risk of harassment claims, but they're also creating a great place to work for their employees. So, hopefully, it's been a shame with all of this stuff in the news, but hopefully maybe there will be some benefit to it if organizations start to review their policies and practices and create those kinds of open communication organizations.
And I would just, from my own experience, add that I think it's helpful to get these issues surfaced early, because time does not fix these problems. My experience is, if you delay it, it only makes it worse.
Yes, time does not fix it, and I do think then again we have to have an environment where people do feel comfortable coming forward quickly, and then I think we need to address it quickly too. So time is very important.
Okay, well, thank you, Cindy, for taking the time to talk to us and sharing your insights about what is a very, I think, a timely topic, and one that I think we're becoming even more sensitive to as going forward. So, well, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.